What's it like to be an artist north of 60? And if you're in this age group, why are you turning to express yourself by painting? So stick around, listen to this conversation, and share your thoughts at the end. Hey everyone, welcome to Whole Artist Mastery. I'm Marianne Mitchell. You know, I really love sharing the knowledge and wealth of expertise I've gained over the many years I've been a professional fine artist, and I really hope it helps you grow as an artist. So if you like what you see, you can help the Whole Artist Mastery YouTube channel grow by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Thanks so much. Welcome everyone to October 15th, 2025 on Wednesday. I'm thrilled to have all of you here and want to also extend a welcome to those who will be watching this recording. So what we're discussing today is the whole realm of what it's like to be an artist north of 60, which means that you're over 60 years old. I'm sharing my lens on how I've come to see the generativity that comes about from being an artist north of 60. And the reason I'm stressing that is because it's a perspective that's really come from me piecing together in my weird alchemic way. So this perspective is coming from, again, my way of putting things together. And I'd love to hear from some of you if you hear a correlation to a particular aspect of human culture you see this correlation with. What I'm going to do is share with you 4 stories that lead to that start the thread of what I'm talking about. Now, sometimes the thread is very straight and clear, and other times the thread gets a little, windy and circly and twisty when I talk about this, which is part of the alchemic process that it's still percolating. And so this is really the first prime time debut of this whole idea. The first source is a story I want to share about me. I've been going to various acupuncturists for almost 30 years. And about 10 years ago, I remarked to the person I was working with at the time that I was experiencing more and more this psychic awareness, I guess, prediction of things that are about to happen and then they happen, or thinking about somebody really keenly and then suddenly they call, and we all have that happen, but it was happening more and more. And her response was quite interesting. She said, well, once you cross over menopause, once you go through menopause, the physical energy that you needed to be a reproductive physical body is gone, and it has allowed your psychic energy to get stronger. And that has stuck with me as I continue to get older. We all continue to get older. And I see this power increasing for myself. And so as I'm talking about this, I invite you to think about, has this happened for you as well? The reason I'm mentioning this story is because I think there's an unvarnished quality to clearer psychic thinking, meaning that the physical world, our physicality, yes, as we get older, we have physical issues that we didn't have as a younger person. But in many ways, the focus is less on our physical body. And because I think our minds and our wisdom and our psychic energy are stronger. The second story I want to share has to do with a 10-minute monologue that Dr. Zach Bush gave on a podcast years ago. And I will put this link in the email I send out tomorrow, where he at the time was doing ER rotations. And I forget, he's been in different specialties, but I think he was in the ICU, ER ICU at the time, and he had a very long shift. And during that very long shift, 3 people died on his watch, and he brought all 3 people back on his watch. And so he said that all 3 of them, totally different people from totally different walks of life, they didn't know each other at all said the same thing when they came back. They said, "Why did you bring me back?" That being over there, that whatever amount of time they were gone, they experienced a profound, deep sense of pure love and acceptance that they had never experienced when they were alive. Or his query is, why do we have to wait to get to the other side to have that pure love? And there are a lot of other things he says, but this is the kernel that I'm pulling out for this discussion. The third story has to do with the book that Jean Shinoda Bolen wrote called Crones Don't Whine. And so she talks about the power that we have at this stage of life. And yes, I do believe everyone who's here today is a woman, female. And so she's particularly talking about the power that women have at this stage to change the world through our wisdom. That ties back in with everything else. And the fourth story has to do with something that Joy Harjo said in her interview with Krista Tippett called The Whole of Life. And what she was talking about is that at this perspective, north of 60, well, she actually said north of 50, we have the ability to go back to the beginning in a way, because as we get older, we get closer to moving on to the spirit world. As we came into this life as an infant, we were closer to the spirit world. And so there's a sense of completion that we are beginning to experience between the beginning of our life and the end of our life. Now, I am in no way suggesting that we're all at the end of our life, but we are in the third phase of our life. So we're closer to it than we were 10, 15, 20 years ago. And so this awareness of authenticity, kindness, and having an equilibrium between our wisdom and our physicality, and being able to see this sense of completion comes to us at this stage of life. So how does this all relate to making abstract art? Well, in one of my long walks and ponderings and piecing bits of information together, I began to see the correlation of authenticity, kindness, equilibrium, and completion to the 4 phases of making abstract art. Now, I talked a bit about this in last month's Wham Wednesday as it relates to beauty. So you could say that beauty is something that, this is a question. Is beauty something that we value more at this stage of life than we did? It's a different kind of beauty. It may be a beauty that's rooted in authenticity as opposed to surface physical presentation. But I see the correlation between the 4 phases of making abstract art which are reckless abandon, critical analysis, integration, and resolution. So the first one, reckless abandon, relates to authenticity because it's impossible to express yourself in pure reckless abandon if there are constructs that are getting in your way of either denial or rose-colored glasses or an intellectual intention that keeps you from touching that deep space inside you. Reckless abandon is a time that deep, authentic, molten piece, core piece of who we are, our soul, you might call it our soul, to dance with paint. Okay, and so in order to dance with paint, to let it all hang out with paint, you have to be tapped into your authenticity, your unvarnished truth, whatever word you prefer to authenticity, which I know is an overused word, but there's a reason it's an overused word, because I think people are so craving it. So reckless abandon ties to authenticity. The second phase is critical analysis. And I've come to see how that relates to kindness, because it's impossible to critically analyze your work without kindness for yourself and for what's happening in this process. If you are without kindness, you are judgmentally criticizing your work. When you judgmentally criticize your work, you're building a barrier between where you are, where you've come out of in reckless abandon, and how you're going to go forward, because that judgment is keeping you from being able to move forward. With kindness, you can ask yourself clear questions. What do I like? What do I dislike? You've all heard we go through this. How do I want to go back into this piece? And if the answer to that question is there's nothing here, rather than feeling judgmental about it, you just simply go back to reckless abandon. But in order to do that, you have to hold kindness for yourself and for the world. So then you move into phase 3, which in the process of making abstract art is called integration, or I call integration. That correlates with equilibrium. Integration is about having your intuitive expression remaining tapped into your authentic core expression, work hand in hand with your intellectual decision-making process about compositional choices. So there's an equilibrium that has to be achieved or attained in making that work, okay? That means you're constantly going back and forth, and you cannot be thinking about going back and forth. It's just happening. Some might call this being in the zone. Some might call being in reckless abandon being in the zone. Actually, there are different kinds of zones that you're in. We have authenticity tied to phase 1, which is reckless abandon. We have kindness tied to critical analysis. We have equilibrium tied to integration. And we have completion tied to resolution. And that's a culmination of your intuitive powers and your intellectual powers fusing to have this knowingness that the painting is there, which means that you look at your work with critical analysis by checking it through the compositional checkpoints. There's a way of looking to make sure that your composition is working. But if a painting is just all about a perfect composition and has no emotional soul radiance to it, the painting's not finished. You won't be interested in looking at it for any length of time. So it's got to be both. If a painting, if you're like, oh, I love these colors, but you just sort of know on some intellectual level that something's not quite right, that's not finished either. I happen to think that authenticity, kindness, equilibrium, and completion are all things that we in this stage, being north of 60, have the opportunity, the potential, the ability to tap into, to pull all together through the practice of making abstract art. Now, there are lots of other ways you can attain these things, through meditation, through various different religious practices. I'm sure there are many. I don't want to start listing a whole bunch of them, but you're all here because you're painters or making some kind of art. And you're all here because I think you're all north of 60 and you're drawn to paint. One of the reasons I felt this was a subject that needed to come to the foreground, many of you who are here today are working with me in individual mentorship programs. And many of you with me have had this conversation about, usually initially in deciding whether you want to enter into this kind of work. Many of the people who have those conversations with me say, well, you know, I just have to express myself this way at this time in my life. I see abstract expression as a way to find myself, find something deeper inside me that I've never been able to touch. And this is the way I think I can do it. I think that may resonate with many of you. I'm here today having been on the path of abstraction since I really was a kid. To be quite transparent, I actually feel more like myself north of 60 than I have ever felt before. Now, some of you are shaking your heads. Maybe you feel that way too. Because it is a time that we can finally shed all of our varnishes and be unvarnished. We don't wear as much makeup anymore. I can't wear any right now because I just had cataract surgery. So, but as most of you know, I rarely do anyway. We can be ourselves in a way that was much more difficult when we were younger. So that's that authenticity. It's really hard to navigate these waters at this stage of life without kindness for yourself and really for those who are in your life. You know, I keep saying to my friends and my husband, we have to give each other grace because we can't do things like we used to. And we can't get mad at each other because we didn't do it the way it should be done. That's kindness. It's a time that our increasing psychic wisdom is in balance with our physical capabilities. Now, many of us have physical capabilities that are debilitating, that are becoming more of a problem. So all the more reason to attain that equilibrium. I worked with an artist, her name was Jerry Grossman, and she came to Monhegan Island for my first retreat when she was 89. She came the next year when she was 90. She decided that maybe the ferry crossing was a little much for her at 91. So she went to Ireland instead. And the reason she could navigate those hilly, stony paths is that she had been taking lessons on, I think it's called the Alexander technique, which was teaching her how to balance her thinking, her feeling with her physical movements. And it worked. So that's equilibrium. And as I said earlier, if we now have a perspective that can see a sense of completion from beginning to end. All of these things are part of the process of making an abstract painting. You need to be authentic. You need to have kindness. You need to have that equilibrium, and you need to be able to own completion to make a good abstract painting. The question is, how can making abstract art when you're north of 60 shift your paradigm? This is how it can be done, because it weaves a sense of wholeness in ourselves from the authentic to the completion through the process of the beginning to the end of a painting. It mirrors these 4 tenets that we need to live by at this stage of life. Shall I say them again? Authenticity, kindness, equilibrium, and completion. So I think that might be the end of my thread.
I really hope you enjoyed this conversation, which is actually an edited version of Wham Wednesday, which is a monthly series. I call them traveling conversations that I offer once a month on Wednesdays. So if you're interested in joining the conversation live and or listening to the recording, you can sign up for the Whole Artist Mastery mailing list by going to the website, and you will receive a complimentary guide to what Whole Artist Mastery is all about. It has a lot of really interesting things in there that people find quite helpful to your practice, to their practice. So I really hope to see you at the next Wham Wednesday, which, if you're watching fall of 25, is November 5th, 2025 at 12 noon Eastern Time. So I hope to see you there. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.